Across the unfathomable void, where empires rise and fall on the miscalculations of gods and mortals alike, a lesson was etched in the cold light of dying stars. A lesson about humanity. The Galactic Federation, in all its supposed wisdom and interstellar power, made an error. A profound, catastrophic error in judgment that would ripple through the star lanes and rewrite their understanding of the cosmos. They looked upon our envoys, listened to our proposals for peace, our carefully worded treaties, our offers of mutual understanding, and in the quiet cadence of human diplomacy, they heard only the whisper of weakness. They saw our outstretched hand, and in their hubris, imagined it incapable of forming a fist. This is the unvarnished account of their gravest miscalculation, the Galactic Federation's biggest mistake. Assuming human diplomacy meant weakness, and the brutal, unyielding truth it unveiled about the steel that lies beneath our skin, the fire in our spirit, and the unshakable resolve forged in millennia of trial and tribulation. This isn't just a tale of interstellar politics. It's a mirror reflecting the dangerous folly of underestimation, a folly many of us commit in our own lives, against others, and even against ourselves. Prepare to understand why true strength rarely needs to shout, and why the most dangerous entities are often those who choose peace, until peace is no longer an option. The Federation, a conglomeration of species, ancient, diverse, and by their own reckoning enlightened. They had seen suns born and die. They had navigated black holes and charted galaxies yet unnamed by human tongues. Their power was immense, their reach galactic, and in their long history they had developed a rather simplistic, almost binary understanding of emergent civilizations. Species were either predators, overtly aggressive, seeking dominance through immediate and brutal conquest. These they understood, and often crushed or quarantined. Or species were prey, pliable, easily intimidated, seeking to appease and avoid conflict at all costs. These they catalogued, managed, and often exploited. So when humanity finally stepped onto the galactic stage, extending a hand of cautious friendship, offering dialogue before ultimatums, the Federation's analysts and strategists consulted their well-worn playbooks and filed us neatly into the latter category. Our diplomats spoke of shared futures, of understanding, of mutual benefit. They did not rattle sabers. They did not issue threats. They sought common ground. And in the grand, echoing halls of the Federation Council, where voices were often raised in displays of dominance and power, the measured tones of human representatives were misinterpreted, critically, fatally. What did the Federation see in human diplomacy? They saw a species that flinched from the prospect of open conflict. They saw our exhaustive internal debates, our philosophical quandaries about the ethics of war, our painstaking efforts to build consensus before action, as indecision, as a lack of unified will. They saw our willingness to offer concessions in negotiation not as a sign of strategic flexibility, but as a sign of a species desperate to avoid a fight it knew it couldn't win. Our emphasis on treaties and interstellar law, a pathetic attempt by the weak to bind the strong with mere words. Their cultural anthropologists, no doubt, reported back on humanity's long and bloody history of internal conflict, and ironically concluded that such a species, so prone to fighting amongst itself, must surely be exhausted, broken, and therefore eager to submit to a higher, more stable authority to save itself from its own destructive tendencies. They mistook our self-awareness for self-loathing, our desire for a better way as an admission of inferiority. Their logic from their predator-prey worldview was sound. If a species possessed true strength, true martial capability, why would it bother with the tedious, time-consuming process of diplomacy? Why negotiate when you can dictate? Why seek agreement when you can impose your will? Their sensors scanned for bared teeth and bristling armor, for overwhelming displays of technological might presented as a first resort. Finding instead reasoned debate, proposals for collaborative scientific endeavor, and appeals to universal principles, they logged humanity, compliant, low-threat, potentially useful resource base. They assumed our preference for peace was born out of an incapacity for war. They assumed our desire to talk was rooted in an inability to act. This, right here, was the seed of their monumental error. They saw the calm surface of the ocean and never once considered the terrifying power of the abyssal currents lurking beneath. They confused civility with fragility, and in doing so, they signed a warrant for their own profound awakening. The universe rarely suffers fools gladly, especially those who wield immense power with such shallow understanding. The brutal truth, which the Federation would learn to its profound cost, is that human diplomacy is not and never has been a synonym for weakness. It is, in fact, one of the most potent, most sophisticated, and often most deceptive expressions of human strength. It is a tool, sharpened over millennia of complex social interaction, brutal tribal warfare, global conflicts, and existential threats that would have shattered lesser species. Humanity did not offer peace because we had forgotten war. We offered peace because we understood its horrifying cost, its generational scars, its Pyrrhic victories, better than most beings in this galaxy could possibly comprehend. Our diplomacy was not born of fear, but of an agonizingly earned wisdom. It was the calculated sheathing of the sword, not the absence of one. It was the conscious choice of a species that had looked into the abyss of total annihilation, often of its own making, and chosen repeatedly to pull back to seek another path. This choice, this capacity for restraint in the face of provocation is not weakness. It is an immense, disciplined strength. It is the strength of a master swordsman who keeps his blade in its scabbard not because he cannot fight, but because he knows the precise, devastating moment to draw it. Consider the energy, the intellect, the sheer strategic depth required for effective diplomacy. It demands an understanding of alien psychologies, of intricate economic and political systems, of unspoken cultural cues. It requires patience, a virtue alien to many overtly aggressive species. It requires the ability to model countless future scenarios, to weigh risks and rewards with a clarity born of high stakes. This is not the domain of the weak-minded or the faint of heart. This is the chess game played while others are still crudely overturning the board. The Federation, in its arrogance, saw only the polite facade, the calm demeanor of our envoys. They failed to perceive the colossal intellect, the unwavering resolve, the deep, historical understanding of power dynamics that informed every word, every gesture, every carefully crafted proposal. Human diplomacy is also a manifestation of efficiency. War is costly in lives, in resources, in time. A species that has endured scarcity, that has clawed its way up from the mud through sheer ingenuity and resourcefulness, understands the value of conservation. Why expend blood and treasure to take what might be gained through intelligent negotiation or mutual agreement? This isn't cowardice, it's pragmatism. It's the strategic allocation of finite power. The Federation, with its vast, perhaps seemingly limitless resources, may have forgotten this fundamental principle. They mistook our calculated efficiency for an unwillingness to spend what was necessary. They failed to understand that we conserve our energy not because we lack it, but so that when we do commit, our strike is overwhelming and utterly decisive. Furthermore, human diplomacy has always been a way to gather intelligence, to understand the adversary, to find their weaknesses, their pressure points, their unspoken fears. While our diplomats spoke of peace, they were also observing, learning, analyzing. They were mapping the Federation's power structures, their internal divisions, their technological dependencies, their psychological blind spots. The conference table is also a battlefield, one where information is the weapon and insight is the armor. The Federation, convinced of its superiority, broadcast its intentions, its arrogance, its underestimation of humanity for all to see. Our envoys listened, noted, and transmitted. And what of the Stoic ideal? That strength lies in virtue, in reason, in self-control? Human diplomacy at its best embodies this. It is the application of logos, of reasoned argument, to tame the chaos of unchecked aggression, of pathos. It is the courage to stand firm on principles without resorting to immediate violence, to absorb blows, to endure provocation while calmly, relentlessly pursuing a just and rational outcome. The Federation saw this as passivity. They could not comprehend the inner fortitude required to meet threats with dialogue, to meet arrogance with patience, to meet demands with principled refusal rather than immediate reactive force. They confused the calm exterior, the product of immense self-discipline, with an empty shell. They mistook the deliberate, reasoned mind for a vacant one. This misinterpretation of human diplomacy as weakness wasn't just a simple error. It was a fundamental failure to understand the very nature of a mature, intelligent, and deeply experienced species. It was a failure to see that the hand offered in peace could, with lightning speed and terrifying resolve, become the fist that defends, the mind that outwits, and the spirit that endures. Now let us delve into the shadows, into the part of the human equation the Federation so blissfully, so arrogantly ignored. What lies dormant when diplomacy is the chosen path? What sleeping giant did their condescension prod? This is where their assumption of weakness shatters into a million terrifying pieces. For behind the velvet glove of human diplomacy, there has always been a mailed fist of iron, forged in the hottest fires of survival. The Federation mistook our preference for peace as an incapacity for war. They could not have been more catastrophically wrong. Humanity is a species shaped by conflict. Our entire history, from the Stone Age to the Space Age, is a relentless narrative of struggle, adaptation, and an almost terrifying resilience. We have fought nature, we have fought disease, we have fought scarcity, and most devastatingly, we have fought ourselves. This crucible of unending trial has not made us inherently weak. It has made us unbelievably, almost unnaturally tough. It has bred into our very DNA a capacity for endurance, for sacrifice, for innovation under extreme pressure that few species in the galaxy could comprehend, let alone match. The Federation saw our internal squabbles and labeled us fractured. They failed to see that this constant internal friction, while often tragic, also made us incredibly adaptable. We are not a monolith. We are a chorus of diverse, often competing ideas. And when an external threat becomes existential, this diversity coalesces into an unpredictable, multifaceted, and terrifyingly effective response. We are masters of asymmetrical warfare, not by grand design, but by necessity. We have always been the underdog, fighting larger, stronger foes, relying on cunning, on improvisation, on sheer bloody-minded refusal to yield. They mistook the farmer for a mere peasant, forgetting that the same hands that tenderly coax life from the soil can, with equal resolve, wield the scythe against a threat. They did not understand that a species forged in the crucible of ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the constant, grinding pressure of its own ambitions. A species that had stared into the abyss of its own making and chosen to step back, time and again, does not do so from a position of frailty. It does so from a position of knowing, intimately, the cost of going over that edge, and reserving that terrible journey for only the most dire, most unavoidable of circumstances. Consider our capacity for focused rage. Humans are by nature often slow to truly, collectively ignite. We debate, we argue, we seek alternatives. But when diplomacy fails, when our backs are against the wall, when our core values or our very existence are threatened, something primal awakens. A cold, calculating fury. A species-wide mobilization of resources, intellect, and will that is terrifying to behold. The Federation saw our diplomats. They never saw a world united in total war. They never saw factories churning out weapons of unimaginable power, driven by the quiet, desperate determination of ordinary people. They never saw scientists, artists, philosophers, and laborers, all turning their diverse talents to a single, unyielding purpose: survival, and if necessary, victory at any cost. They underestimated our technological adaptability. Humanity doesn't just invent, we innovate under duress at an exponential rate. Give us a problem, especially one that threatens us, and our minds ignite. The Federation, perhaps technologically superior in many overt ways, likely possessed systems that were mature, stable, and therefore predictable. Human technology, especially in wartime, is a chaotic, rapidly evolving beast. We reverse engineer, we improvise, we find unexpected applications for existing tools. We create entirely new paradigms out of sheer necessity. They might have superior shields, but we would find the one frequency they didn't account for. They might have faster ships, but we would devise strategies that turned their speed into a vulnerability. They were playing chess. We were capable of flipping the board and starting a game of poker, then switching to go, all while they were still contemplating their next move. And then there's the human spirit, that intangible, unquantifiable element that has seen us through countless dark ages, our capacity for hope in the face of despair, our willingness to sacrifice for future generations, our stubborn, mule-headed refusal to accept defeat, even when all logical indicators suggest surrender is the only option. How does a purely logical, materially focused entity like the Federation quantify that? They can't. It's not on their spreadsheets. It doesn't register on their sensors. They saw a species with a relatively short lifespan, with fragile bodies, and assumed a corresponding fragility of will. They never understood that a human fighting for their home, for their children, for their freedom, for an ideal, is one of the most dangerous forces in the universe. The Federation saw our art, our music, our poetry, perhaps as quaint cultural artifacts. They didn't understand that these are the very things that fuel our spirit, that remind us of what we're fighting for. They didn't understand that a species capable of such profound beauty is also capable of profound ferocity when that beauty is threatened. They mistook our compassion for a vulnerability, failing to see it as the wellspring of our greatest protective instincts. The hidden fangs of humanity are not just our weapons or our armies. They are our collective intelligence, our adaptability, our historical resilience, our capacity for total commitment, and an indomitable spirit that simply refuses to break. The polite envoy offering a treaty today could be, if pushed, the grim-faced general tomorrow calmly ordering actions that would make the stars themselves weep. The Federation, in its blissful ignorance, was about to poke a sleeping dragon, assuming it was a harmless lizard. The awakening would be brutal, and the lessons learned would be seared into their history for eternity. The day of reckoning inevitably arrived. It always does when arrogance meets reality. The Galactic Federation, secure in its assumption of human weakness, finally overplayed its hand. Perhaps it was a demand for unconditional resource tribute. Perhaps it was the annexation of a newly established human colony, deemed strategically irrelevant by Federation planners, but deeply symbolic to humanity. Or maybe it was a more insidious attempt to culturally or politically neuter humanity, to ensure our permanent subservience. The specific spark is less important than the inferno it ignited. The polite requests from human diplomats ceased. The reasoned arguments fell silent. In their place came a single, unified, and utterly uncompromising message: this far and no further. The Federation Council, accustomed to human deference, likely met this newfound resolve with amusement, then irritation, then a dawning sense of unease. They had prodded the supposedly placid creature, and it had not flinched or retreated. It had turned, and its eyes, once seen as soft and pleading, now held a glint of cold, hard light. What followed was not the swift, surgical subjugation the Federation anticipated. It was something entirely different, something their vaunted strategists had never modeled. It was the human storm. Perhaps it began subtly. Federation supply lines, stretched thin across their vast empire, began to experience disruptions. Small, almost untraceable acts of sabotage. Communications blackouts in key sectors. Intelligence leaks that sowed confusion and mistrust among their allied species. Human diplomatic channels, once used for peace overtures, now became conduits for a different kind of message, carefully targeted information, exploiting fissures within the Federation's own power structures, appealing to other subjugated or overlooked species who chafed under Federation rule. Humanity, the supposed political naifs, began to play the great game with a skill that was as surprising as it was effective. Then came the more direct confrontations. A Federation patrol fleet sent to pacify a rebellious human outpost expecting token resistance found itself ambushed, not by overwhelming numbers but by tactics they couldn't predict. Human ships, perhaps less advanced individually, fought with a desperate, coordinated ferocity. They used the environment, asteroid fields, nebulae, gravitational anomalies, in ways the Federation's rigid doctrines hadn't accounted for. They took losses, terrible losses, but they inflicted disproportionate damage. They didn't break. They didn't rout. They fought until the last ship, the last crew member, selling their lives at a cost the Federation had never imagined paying for such a minor engagement. Word spread. The weak humans were fighting, and not just fighting, but fighting smart, fighting hard. The Federation, in its hubris, likely escalated. They sent larger fleets, more advanced weaponry. They expected to crush the human upstarts quickly and make an example of them. Instead, they found themselves drawn into a protracted, grueling conflict across multiple fronts. Human ingenuity, that desperate, brilliant spark, flared to life. New weapons, new defenses, new strategies appeared with bewildering speed. Our scientists and engineers, fueled by existential threat, achieved breakthroughs in months that should have taken decades. We turned their strengths against them. Their reliance on complex networked systems became a vulnerability to our cyber warfare. Their rigid battle doctrines became predictable patterns for our unconventional tactics. But it wasn't just about technology or tactics. It was about will. Federation soldiers fighting for galactic order or resource acquisition faced human beings fighting for their homes, their families, their very right to exist. The motivation was asymmetrical. Human propaganda, if you could call it that, wasn't about galactic domination. It was about survival, freedom, and the right to self-determination. Concepts that resonated, perhaps dangerously, even among some of the Federation's own ranks or their other client species. There might have been a pivotal battle, a Thermopylae, or a Stalingrad in space, where a vastly outnumbered human force, against all odds, held a critical point, or inflicted a devastating blow that shattered the myth of Federation invincibility. A moment where Federation commanders, watching their screens in disbelief, saw their best ships and bravest warriors broken against a wall of sheer human obstinacy. A moment where the cost of subduing humanity began to look not just high, but potentially ruinous. The Federation's awakening was not a single event, but a cascade of them. It was the dawning, horrifying realization that their initial assessment was not just wrong, but catastrophically, fundamentally flawed. They saw the polite requests turn into unyielding lines drawn in the cosmic sand. They pushed and felt not soft earth, but bedrock. Then steel. Then the inferno they themselves had kindled. They learned the hard way that human diplomacy was the civilized restraint of a genuinely formidable power, not the pleading of a helpless one. They learned that when you strip away the layers of civility, when you threaten what is truly dear to humanity, you unleash a capacity for focused, intelligent, and utterly relentless conflict that could challenge any power in the galaxy. The mistake was realized not in a quiet debriefing room, but in the wreckage of their fleets, in the silence of their lost outposts, and in the dawning fear in the eyes of their own soldiers. The universe had delivered its brutal lesson, and the tuition was paid in blood and iron. This story of the Galactic Federation's colossal blunder is more than just a hypothetical scenario in the stars. It's a powerful allegory, a stark reminder of timeless truths that resonate deeply within our own lives, our societies, and our individual journeys of self-improvement and mental fortitude. The lessons gleaned from their misjudgment are not just for fictional alien empires. They are for you, for me, for anyone navigating the complexities of human interaction and the pursuit of genuine strength. First and most critically, never mistake politeness for weakness in others or in yourself. How many times have you encountered someone quiet, considerate, willing to compromise, and in your haste, dismiss them as soft, as a pushover? How many times have you been that person, choosing civility and reason, only to be underestimated, patronized, or exploited by those who equate noise with substance and aggression with power? The Federation's error is replayed daily in boardrooms, in relationships, in casual encounters. True strength, the kind that endures, the kind that can truly shape outcomes, rarely needs to beat its chest. It is often found in the calm demeanor, the thoughtful response, the principled stand taken without bluster. Recognize this quiet power in others and cultivate it fiercely within yourself. Your diplomacy, your willingness to listen and negotiate, is a sign of your intelligence and self-control, not a deficiency of spirit. Second, understand the profound power of strategic patience and controlled response. Humanity, in our allegory, didn't immediately resort to violence. They engaged, they reasoned, they attempted peace. This wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It allowed them to gather information, to conserve resources, and to ensure that when action was finally taken, it was justified, focused, and backed by unwavering resolve. In your own life, resist the urge for immediate, reactive outbursts. Master your emotions. Learn to absorb pressure, to think strategically, to choose your battles and your timing with precision. This is the essence of mental toughness, not an absence of feeling, but a refusal to be governed by unthinking impulse. The ability to remain calm and deliberate under fire is an immense advantage. Third, cultivate your hidden fangs. Every individual possesses an inner core of strength, a reserve of resilience and capability that often lies dormant, untested. The Federation never saw humanity's true potential until it was unleashed by existential threat. Don't wait for a crisis to discover your own. Through discipline, through continuous self-improvement, through facing discomfort and overcoming challenges, you forge that inner steel. This isn't about becoming aggressive, it's about becoming formidable. It's knowing with quiet confidence that if pushed too far, if your core values are violated, you possess the capacity to respond with decisive, intelligent, and unwavering force. This inner certainty allows you to be genuinely peaceful, because your peace comes from a position of strength, not fear. Fourth, beware the arrogance of underestimation. The Federation's downfall was its hubris. They judged a book by its cover and paid a galactic price. How often do we do the same? We make snap judgments based on superficial appearances, on perceived status, on cultural biases. This not only disrespects others, it blinds us to potential allies, hidden threats, and valuable lessons. Approach every interaction with a degree of humility, with a willingness to see beyond the surface. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, and many possess strengths you cannot immediately perceive. The truly wise individual knows that there is always more to learn, more to understand. Fifth, recognize that true power is multifaceted. The Federation likely defined power in purely material terms: technology, resources, military might. They failed to account for human ingenuity, adaptability, unity of purpose, and the unquantifiable strength of the human spirit. In your own pursuit of self-mastery, don't focus solely on one aspect of strength, physical, financial, or intellectual. Cultivate a holistic power. Emotional resilience, strategic thinking, ethical clarity, the ability to connect with and inspire others, and an unbreakable will. This is the kind of power that can weather any storm. Finally, let your actions be rooted in principle, not ego. Humanity's fierce defense was not for conquest or glory, but for survival, for freedom, for the right to chart their own destiny. When your actions are aligned with deeply held just principles, you unlock a level of motivation and resolve that pure self-interest can never match. Know what you stand for. Be willing to defend it. This principled stance is the bedrock of unshakable inner strength. It transforms diplomacy from mere talk into the reasoned voice of conviction, and it transforms conflict, if unavoidable, from brutal aggression into a necessary defense of what truly matters. The Galactic Federation learned its lesson in the harshest possible way. We have the opportunity to learn it through reflection, through conscious effort, through the daily practice of cultivating our own authentic power. Understand that your civility is a choice, your diplomacy a tool of intelligence, and beneath it all, if you choose to forge it, lies a core of unyielding strength that need never be loud to be profoundly felt. So the question is not whether you possess the capacity for diplomacy or the capacity for ferocity. The question is whether you possess the wisdom to know when each is appropriate, and the discipline to cultivate both to their highest potential. The Federation looked at humanity and saw a species defined by its willingness to talk. They failed to understand that we talk precisely because we know better than most the terrible alternative. They assumed our desire for peace was a sign we couldn't fight. The brutal truth, then and now, is that we seek peace so ardently because we know, with chilling certainty, exactly how to fight. The greatest mistake is not to be diplomatic. The greatest mistake is to believe that diplomacy is the only language a formidable entity can speak. The Federation learned this across the void. In your own life, ensure no one makes that same mistake about you. Cultivate your reason, your patience, your ability to connect and negotiate. But also, with equal dedication, forge the unshakable will, the resilience, the inner fortitude that says, I prefer peace, I will work for peace, but do not mistake my preference for an inability to defend what I hold dear. That is the quiet, indomitable power that truly commands respect. That is the strength that needs no announcement. That is the truth the Federation paid so dearly to understand. Let their cosmic error be your personal enlightenment. Go forth, be both the diplomat and the silent warrior, and let the universe witness your true, balanced, and unshakable strength. Do not let your calm be mistaken for surrender, nor your kindness for weakness. Know your worth, know your power, and walk your path with the quiet confidence of one who is prepared for anything.